the situation here with Diddy real quick, because his defense, like I said, just did a horrific job. Horrific.
What a day. From the government gutting a portion of their case against Diddy to both sides battling it out over the law before closing arguments, we're going to break down everything that happened in day 30 of the Sean Combs criminal trial right now. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law and Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. On the eve of closing arguments in the Sean Diddy Combs federal sex crimes trial, we had another interesting day, day 30, a day that started out with rumors and reporting that charges were dropped against Diddy. That is not accurate. That's not quite what happened. There's also this talk about a constitutional challenge. Both sides, the judge working out the final jury instructions for the jury. This is important. This is the law. This is the rules that will govern the jury's deliberation.
Which I didn't get. I don't know if I went to go live when that news actually happened, but I remember sharing something. I tell you before, I apologize sharing the Tisa Tales shit, because Tisa Tales is just nothing but gossip. Tisa Tales is just tabloid Jet magazine gossip. I apologize for sharing that. The charges weren't dropped. Like I said, they were consolidated. So it made it look like they were dropped, but in all hindsight, they were just consolidated to make it easier for the jury to make an actual decision. That's really what actually happened there.
Very important in a complicated case like this when you have charges of racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, transportation to engage in prostitution. A lot of elements, a lot of factors, a lot of requirements to find Combs guilty of each charge. It's quite complex. It's a battle between both sides, what the language is going to be and what the language is that the jury will hear. And I think the jury will actually probably have to take some time during deliberations to even figure out what these jury instructions mean before they even start deciding the case. And again, we anticipate closings tomorrow, probably going to extend into Friday too. In fact, we learned a little bit more about that today too. Prosecutor Maureen Comey even said that the jury may end up not even starting their deliberations till next week, till Monday. But let's talk about what happened today. And for that, let me bring in
They're going to decide Monday.
Elizabeth Milner, who has been
I already see what's going to happen. They're going to make the decision on Monday.
At Courtroom all day. For everybody who knows, we're recording this right now at like almost 8 o'clock at night. You have been in the courtroom all day. It's been a very, very tiring day, Elizabeth, but great to see you. I have to ask you about the beginning of the day. When we woke up, we found out the government filed this letter regarding jury
Benjamin, Zach, what's going on? What's going on?
Instructions. And remember, to prove racketeering conspiracy, the government needs to prove at least two underlying predicate crimes, essentially. There's arson, there's forced labor, there's kidnapping, there's bribery, there's witness tampering, all to support this idea of there was a criminal enterprise and that Combs and others engaged in a pattern of racketeering activity, a pattern of illegal activity. But then we get this letter from the government, and it says, quote, the government has removed instructions from the charge related to attempted kidnapping under both California and New York law, attempted arson under California law, and aiding and abetting sex trafficking. The government is no longer planning to proceed on these theories of liability, so instructions are no longer necessary. So people might be thinking, oh my gosh, they dropped those underlying crimes, right? Problem is, if you go to the indictment, the latest indictment, for kidnapping and arson, it specifically lays out multiple theories under state law. So there's the actual crimes themselves. It's kidnapping and arson, but there's also conspiracy to commit arson, kidnapping. There's aiding and abetting kidnapping and arson. There's attempted kidnapping and arson. So my initial thought is maybe they're not getting rid of arson and kidnapping as a whole, but only those specific theories, meaning we're arguing Combs engaged in conspiracy to commit arson, but not attempted arson. And remember, this all relates to the testimony of Kid Cudi, Capricorn Clark, Cassie Ventura. That's what we talk about with kidnapping and arson. So, Elizabeth, did you hear anything today in court to provide any kind of clarity on whether arson or kidnapping are still part of this case?
Yeah, I was expecting to hear just something along the lines of that. And, you know, with the government and the defense going just so fast in their arguments, I was really thinking, oh, my God, did I miss them talking about this? But I don't think they even really touched upon this issue when court began finally at 3:45 today, because initially it was going to start at 12, then it was going to start at 2, then it was going to start at 3. Then the defense needed a little more time to read some things through. So then it started at 3:45. And so just as far as, you know, because a lot of people have been like, oh, my God, charges are dropped. Oh, my God, this case is over.
The crazy thing is, as much as they actually have, they don't really have, I should say, as much witnesses as they say about the situation that they have, from Christina Coram to Capricorn to Kid Cudi himself to Cassie. As many witnesses as they have, they didn't have too much evidence as far as the arson goes. They really just had the people there and some people saying, yeah, we drove by Cudi's house. Like, they didn't have anything to say that Diddy per se actually did it as far as trying to blow up Kid Cudi's car. But I mean, it's like, if you read between the lines, it's like, if you have a brain, if you have a light bulb working in your brain cell, yeah, you can pretty much say that, yeah, this nigga tried to blow up Kid Cudi's car. At the same time, they didn't really focus on the arson because it was like, all right, we have bigger fish to fry. So let's not just focus on just the arson to even just to get it charged. You know what I mean?
Government, like, it wasn't any of that, because to your point, Jesse, the government said in their letter it was only applying to attempted kidnapping under California and New York law, attempted arson under California law, and aiding and abetting sex trafficking. But as far as just a big moment, as far as them going into maybe more layman's terms on just what this all meant, they didn't go into that, and it was kind of disappointing. I was hoping they would kind of speak more about that, but really they were just going over these proposed instructions one by one by one, page by page by page.
By the way, I got to say this. As you know, we are always writing a lot of sidebars here. We're researching, we're doing breaking news, and I am constantly on the run. And look, $5. So much time talking about the firebombing for the terms and conditions. Skip the stress, not the nutrition. So, okay, look, we'll find out tomorrow. I still think arson, kidnapping are a big part of this case. They spend so much time talking about the firebombing of Kid Cudi's car, talking about whether Capricorn Clark was kidnapped in different instances, whether or not Cassie was kidnapped in the 2016 video. So I'm sure it's still part of it, but we'll see. Okay, there was a big delay in court. You talked about it. Did I hear this right? It had something to do about, what, a constitutional challenge? I mean, something was going on with the attorneys and the judge. Did you find any clarity about that?
Well, when we first got into court today around 3 o'clock, because initially we were all sat down and ready to go at...
Nah, don't even sugarcoat that shit. The judge scolded Marc Agnifilio, Diddy's lawyer, for the simple fact that he kept trying to make accusations like, oh, the feds have been targeting Diddy for quite some time. And the judge said, look, you ain't going to say no dumb shit like that out your mouth ever again. There's no valid evidence that the feds were targeting this man. So you better calm yourself down with that shit. I better not ever hear you speak of that again. It was a couple of times he had to just pull Mark aside, like, sit Mark down, like, look, you keep with these accusations and trying to threaten the jury's threaten the jury and all this and threaten the court and whatnot, and you ain't gonna be able to say nothing else. You shut the fuck up. We're trying to make these accusations and allegations. Do your closing argument, but the disrespect will not be tolerated, Mr. Agnifilio.
2 o'clock. Then we heard from the marshals and the bailiffs that, this is getting pushed now to 3. But initially what we did learn is that, the parties have agreed to the verdict form, but then the defense asked for just a little more time. Now, initially they wanted 30 minutes. And again, this being around 3 o'clock. So initially we thought, okay, they're going to start at 3:30. Then the defendant, that of course being Sean Combs, wanted just a little bit more time to review these documents. So they pushed it to 3:45. But as far as just what the defense wanted in terms of what document they wanted to read to just get more clarity, because, as more documents are coming in, as more objections are coming in, as we're getting towards the end of the trial, the defense just wanted to take an extra look and an extra careful look at the latest charging document. And so they took that time to do it. Then we came back at 3:45, and then we really started kind of getting into those jury instructions, just really, again, piece by piece by piece.
Let's get into it. So the first one that there seemed to be a lot of debate about, not surprising, one of the most complicated charges of this case, racketeering conspiracy. There are a number of different parts to this. What did they say? Did they come to a decision about what is conspiracy? What is a criminal agreement? What is a criminal enterprise? Some of the big highlights that you saw between the prosecution and the defense, and do we have any kind of answers as to what the jury is going to be instructed regarding the top charge in this case, the charge that carries up to life in prison?
Yeah, and it seems like because it comes with such a hefty penalty of the possibility of life in prison, right, Jesse, that they took so much time really just going through all the thorough details, especially as it pertains to count one, that being racketeering conspiracy, aka RICO. So right off the bat, they get to page 13 and the government had an objection because again, when I say page by page by page, they really took it page 1. Does anyone have objections to, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So by the time they got to page 13, the government objected kind of to the end of the page when it came to the conspiracy instruction, because the government wanted a note about co-conspirators and how they might not have known, but they can still be a part of the conspiracy. Whereas the defense said in an argument that some of the co-conspirators, like Christina Courtroom, like KK, didn't know what was going on. So the defense objected to that because they said that's not necessary. They say that the law requires a co-conspirator join the agreement. Shapiro, again, Alexandra Shapiro making these arguments on behalf of the defense here. But she had said that the issue was the knowledge of the alleged conspiracy. So what ended up happening is the judge overruled the government's objection, and he said that further clarification can be addressed in closing arguments. So then the defense had an objection to that same page.
Speaking of possible co-conspirators, I'm hearing D-Rock is in Vietnam right now. Like, D-Rock done took his ass far away from this shit. He done pulled a Russell Simmons just in case they try to get him.
But then a different line where the line was in reference to actions speak louder than words. And the defense says it makes it seem like circumstantial evidence is more important than direct evidence. And so the judge says that he will change the sentence in context of conspiracy actions may speak louder than words. So again, this is all about the language here, where they're just adding little things here and there where it doesn't seem either prejudicial to the defendant, or that way they can make it very simple for the jury to really kind of understand this. So even in terms of just adding that little word like may is going to be added to those jury instructions. But another thing that they were really kind of talking about was the fourth element of RICO, because the government is saying that, it's more accurate to talk about the agreement of affairs. And their proposal was that the elements reflect the defendant knowingly agreed with co-conspirators, knowingly and unknowingly. And the defense was like, well, that actually goes to the fourth element. And then the judge ended up overruling the government's objection because it says it kind of conflates with the first and fourth element of RICO. Truly, it was a lot of legalese that they were kind of spelling out there. And so even in terms of just, again, it seemed like most of their arguments, especially in the first part of court today, was really just about RICO and the co-conspirators. So the defense had an objection to a line that said that the person must be common to the group as a whole. And they were saying the government is conflating things, that the purpose has to be a common purpose. There's a lot of case law about the common purpose. Again, the defense making this argument. The judge said that the proposed language might confuse the jury, and that common purpose could be a number of different things. And so Alexandra Shapiro asked if this could be added. The purpose must be a common purpose and can't merely represent one individual's own self-interest. So they were just talking about adding, if not shared, as the group as a whole. And then the government's like, okay, well, I don't think this is an instruction that should be received, and they don't agree with the case necessarily cited. The judge agreed that he wasn't going to add the language, so he ended up overruling the defense's objection. And so it's
pretty much what it is that they're having a confusion battle as far as what is actual coercion in regards to this, what would be considered really a RICO, I should say what could be considered actual racketeering acts in this case. So pretty much they're trying to just figure out clarity as far as how these things are even being charged to this gentleman, as far as like I said, the validity of the actual racketeering part. So as we went over, the actual definition of it was as far as him paying for certain things with company money, and then of course the acts of coercion with the women. They're really trying to just figure out, like I said, the actual guidelines of it all to actually make a further decision. That was one of the reasons why they had to consolidate the charges and not have so many a variety of charges for the jury to look at. They wanted to just make it very simple for them to actually make a decision.
like for the most part, Jesse, that really it was kind of like, what did the co-conspirators know? What did the defendant know in terms of just were they committing these, alleged criminal acts knowingly or unknowingly, those types of things? Because they even talked about just the core group overall and how the government was saying the core included this chief of staff, the security, and then they kind of pointed to things like D-Rock as the security. And again, so really just kind of focusing on that core group of people and whether or not they're all co-conspirators and things of that sort.
Look, the prosecution wants it as broad as possible, right? Because that's the way that they can actually convict them. The defense wants it as specific as possible so that the prosecution can't meet the burden here. They can't meet the elements. And it's important when you talk about what's the common purpose here. Was it just to serve and benefit Diddy, or was there a different common purpose? Was it a larger common purpose? So the criminal agreement, the criminal enterprise, the common purpose, that's all one part of racketeering. Then I mentioned you have these underlying predicate crimes. I understand today that was a big point of discussion too, right? What about forced labor, maybe not arson, kidnapping, but forced labor, maybe bribery or tampering with a witness. Any highlights from what we should be thinking about in terms of the underlying predicate crimes the prosecution has to prove as part of RICO conspiracy?
Yeah, they definitely spend a lot of time mainly talking about obstruction too. So for example, on page 29 of these proposed jury instructions, the government said that they're not required to prove that there was an ongoing federal case or investigation. Then they asked that that language be included in the jury instructions. And at first I was kind of a little confused about this argument. I was like, okay, what does this have to do with what? Because, when we're inside that courtroom, we're not seeing these pages on the exhibit screens and nothing like that. We're really just taking their word as in terms of just listening to their argument. So I kind of got where they were going with this, because the government was saying that they're not required to prove that the conspirator knew that there was an investigation. Then the defense kind of chimes in and they say that the defendant still has to know or still has to have something in mind. And then I kind of thought about it in just terms of the testimony. And I think it's kind of related a little bit to Mia, because remember when Mia was on the witness stand, she said after Cassie's lawsuit came out, that shortly afterwards, D-Rock had messaged her. And so I think they were kind of trying to say that maybe the defense was kind of trying to say that Diddy didn't know that there was a federal investigation going on at this time. And so this whole allegation of obstruction in terms of reaching out to Mia, maybe possibly getting, her, word of approval to go and talk about, whether or not that Cassie and Sean Combs had this toxic relationship or not, or even just the allegations that Mia had while she was on the witness stand talking about how
Yes, actually. Now, all the kids? No, of course not, because let me come on camera for this. I'm trying not to yawn so much on the camera. I'll be honest with y'all. I'm just dead beat fucking tired. I am dead beat fucking tired after the past week. As far as the children go, and we're going to get into Justin Combs and Diddy's new lawsuit that just arrived today. Justin now has a gang rape lawsuit. So on top of that, Justin has, I think he's in the Little Rock case. He was mentioned in the Cassie case. He might have his own still. I believe he was in I believe there's a separate lawsuit from what happened with the shooting with him and the G gentleman in between Diddy and him as well. I think there's a lawsuit for that. But like I said, Justin is in his own shit. Christian also has a sexual assault lawsuit. Like, it's like the apple didn't fall far from the fucking tree at all. But of course, we know Justin is not his biological son. Christian is, but Quincy and Justin are not Diddy's biological kids. That's first and foremost. Then you have the twins, which I was going to mention. I don't think they're going to mention it here, but the twins actually walked out of court yesterday in tears after the closing arguments, which honestly, I understand. Like, you hearing about all this shit that your dad did, and it's starting to sound extremely believable. On top of, I think they've been looking themselves through the internet just on the different things based upon what's been said about him, trying to find different footage themselves of how their father is outside of how he acts with them in the house as a father. So then there's that aspect. Like I said, they've never heard this side of their father. And then for it to all be true, for a good portion of it to really be true, like I said, that's hurtful for them as children because they still have to go to school with that shit, I think. No, actually, no, I think the twins graduated. Now that I'm thinking about it, I think the twins have either graduated and going to college maybe, but I don't even know if they still in high school. But the fact that they had to go to school while this was even going on is still like pretty fucked up. Then you have, of course, I'm so glad Sarah Chapman kept Chance out of this. The other daughter, I forgot that he had an oldest daughter that's of age right now, and I'm glad Sarah pretty much kept her out of this bullshit, kept her out of the mess in general. It's hard to say because she was completely drugged out. She was blacked out. She was drugged up and blacked out. Who are you talking about though? Cassie? That it's hard to say because Cassie was completely drugged out and blacked out. Is that what you're saying? A part of Cassie's lawsuit made me think she had to do things with one of the sons. So I don't necessarily. So I'm not going to throw that out the window, right? Because that could definitely be part of it as well. I'm not going to say that's not a possibility, especially with Quincy, right? Or Justin himself. I don't think that's I don't know if that's a possibility I just throw right out. At the same time, you do see Diddy kind of trying to keep his children away from what he does, in a sense, besides Justin. Justin, I think, is the only one that he pretty much like let in on a lot of different shit. King Combs, I think, was just partying around his family and just getting into shit. I think he was just, the bad Tommy Pickles of things. Quincy, of course, has been just doing his own thing with music and movies. He hasn't really paid it. I don't think he's really even paid attention too much. Just since how sincere he seems with, those first two viral vlog videos the first two vlog videos he tried to do that, pretty much nobody could look at because they were going to get banned on YouTube and shit like that. Those two videos that he did with trying to say, yo, my dad's a family man. My dad's a family man. Notice he stopped doing that shit. When he started hearing, and pretty much when all that information started coming about, him rubbing the semen on his nipples and whatnot, all that dumb shit coming out with the freak offs, Quincy stopped doing all them documentaries. He stopped doing all the my daddy's a sweetheart bullshit. He started doing all that shit. He just said, you know what? Maybe y'all right. Maybe my dad did some of these things. I can't necessarily prove he's a good dad. Even though I know he's a good dad to me, I can't prove it to y'all he's a good fucking person with all these other shit going on. Podcast lawsuit, yeah. I don't know if she did something with one of his sons. I don't necessarily know if that would be true. Like I said, the only person that would remotely even be able to do that would be Quincy. I'm not necessarily, hey Medusa, what's going on? I'm not necessarily thinking that Cassie would do something with a Justin Combs. Not even Daphne. Like I said, I think he kept them away from the freak off life.
He thought that there was kind of this insinuation that, money would be given to her if she were to, make a statement in favor of Sean Combs. And so that's when it really clicked to me. But then the government is like, okay, I think the nexus is.
Yeah, I could, the crazy thing is, I get where you're coming from, Julia. Only thing is, I can't really correlate that in particular to this because I can't agree with you and say I never knew my father, right? Because perfect example with me, I didn't know about my dad until I was 5 years old like that. I didn't know the truth about my dad until I was 5. He had died when I was at the age of 3 and then I didn't know until on my 5th birthday party that he was actually dead. And then, like I said, you grow up through life just wishing that you never even heard that before. That he was actually dead, and you start saying, you know what, let me block that out. Maybe he'll just pop up somewhere one day. I remember looking at one of the shows. I forgot. I think Meet the Browns. The dad, not the granddad with the gray hairs, but the actual dad, like the actual like muscle bound dad and shit. Like he favors my actual father like that. So I remember used to think, I was like, damn, maybe he just picked up acting or something like that and just forgot about things and just got away from the life, thought of stupid shit like that. I actually wish I did know my dad. Like the little pictures that I used to have, like my ex has either destroyed them, and then the last ex that I had has them all in the basement with my family pictures and whatnot that's left from the house that I was living in. All that shit is back with her, and I don't have a way to get to it. So definitely can't. I can understand you saying you glad you never knew your dad, but it's also the thing of I wish I did know mine. And they say, would you rather have never known? I forgot how the actual saying goes now. Would you rather have not known or rather have not known? Okay, would you rather have not known who he was or just not know of him? That's what it was. I wish I actually knew my father and got to see him, that type of thing. So in regards to Diddy, of course, his kids are just in different scenarios of the spectrum here, because you have, like I said, Justin, who's have his own lawsuits. You have King Combs, who has his own lawsuit. Then you have Quincy just trying to be Quincy and just do his acting thing and be cool and just be oblivious to all this shit like he tried to be for so many years until it all caught up to him, And then you have the twins, who pretty much just finding out all this shit that was going on with even their brothers. Shit that they didn't, know about their brothers. The twins are just finding out about this shit. And they don't have anybody to talk to or run to because their mom is dead and now their dad is about to go to jail. The twins probably have it the hardest right now. Justin still has Misa. I would think King Combs and the twins have it the hardest right now. Quincy still has Al B. Shore. Sarah Chapman's kid Chance is with her. The twins and King Combs are probably the only ones that are feeling like they are up Schitt's Creek without a paddle. King Combs has to rap to pay some type of bills right now. Literally. He has zero choice because he has no motion whatsoever. All his motion came from his dad. That is it. I mean, yeah, kids know more than the adults, but that's what I said. You have to think about the fact that Justin and King Cole and Christian were a part of what he was doing. The only people that actually knew or were involved with the shit that he was doing. I really do think that the twins just had no actual idea until this court case. They pretty much thought their dad was a sweetheart until they started finding out all this shit during court. Because the twins, like I said, were pretty much kept isolated away from all this shit. They were still young and innocent girls. They didn't necessarily know about that lifestyle whatsoever that Justin and Christian got to grow up and Quincy got to grow up in while he was being famous. The twins didn't get that. When the twins came into the picture, Kim Porter was still just being mommy to them at home. They just had the regular go to school, come home, do your homework, and be a regular teenager life. They didn't have the partying and drinking and smoking and being around freak offs and whatnot like Justin and Christian did. The twins didn't. So like I said, you have to look at it that way too. Like, only the boys knew. The girls didn't know shit like that. Those two need to be heading to college. Probably one of the last places they can create an identity of their own and have more emotional stability. I 1000% agree with you with that. Like, go away to college at this point. Just whatever you have left, just go away to college and rebuild and make a new life and new identity for yourself. Yeah, that's another thing too. Like, as much money as you have, you've never sent your kids off to college anywhere. Not one of them kids has gone to college. Not one. Not one. I don't know about Chance, but as far as the other 5, no, none of them. So definitely, I would agree. Just do what you can as far as the twins go. Just do what you can, and Just go off to college and start a brand new life because your daddy is cooked.
It's about communicating with the federal officer. And so the judge says that he'll consider copying the language from the obstruction part into this particular part of the jury instruction. Then when we kind of talk about forced labor, when they were talking about forced labor, the government objected to some lines just including that labor services include sexual services. And they kind of say it's supported by the R. Kelly decision. So the government says that they will argue that sexual labor falls under the statute. And they said that we need to make it clear to the jury that this is a different kind of labor and it falls within labor and services, where the defense says clearly sex trafficking can fall under forced labor. And they kind of pointed to their motion for acquittal argument that they had made just yesterday. And so the judge ended up overruling the government's objection because he said that the concern is that the jury may be confused that sexual services automatically count as laboring services. And so the government will have a chance to kind of argue about this during their summations, aka their closing arguments. And so and there was kind of, just again, the legalese as far as the defense objecting to lines about difficult and compulsory. And they say it goes to mirror what the government argues, that the term labor is sufficient. You don't need to include specially. Again, they're really just kind of making sure that every single word is accurate and perfect for the jury to really kind of understand and really kind of digest it as they're getting all these really kind of like legal jargon, legal words in terms of the instructions that they're going to be eventually given before they are able to deliberate.
Yeah, and the forced labor, the sexual acts as part of forced labor is interesting when you think about Mia, right? Because Mia says that she was sexually assaulted as an assistant. So then you move on to sex trafficking. Sex trafficking by force, fraud, coercion. There are 2 counts, minimum 15 years in prison. That's the way that it was argued by the prosecution. And you have one for Cassie Ventura Fine, one for Jane. It was interesting because I was reading the filings last night going into this, and the prosecution made a number of interesting choices or recommendations for language, in terms of they basically wanted instructions that prior consensual sexual activity is not determinative of whether a victim was sex trafficked. Even if a victim receives compensation, this can still be sex trafficking.
And see, even while they're saying all this, right, while they're trying to figure out what necessarily is what as far as in regards to the sex trafficking, things like that, right? Imagine the daughters sitting in court listening to this and asking themselves, well, damn, if he's owning the fact that he was beating Cassie, and he's owning the fact that he was beating on Daphne, what was he doing to my mom? Like the daughters left out the courtroom crying yesterday. Literally crying. They have pictures of the daughters leaving the courtroom crying yesterday. And I can only imagine what's going through their head. I can only imagine. Right? Because you have to think about that. You just have to think about that, right? Like, if he's owning up to all of this shit, in a sense, and then he gets convicted of sex trafficking and, domestic abuse and things like that. These kids can only think of, well, damn, if he was doing this to all these other girls and just treating them like shit, what was he doing to my mom? Especially when you're going to school and being told that, yo, your dad killed your mom. You going all over the internet. You can't escape the fact that your father is responsible, allegedly, for killing your mom. And then you hearing all this other shit that's going on surrounding it. I can only imagine the shit that's going through those twins' heads right now. Imagine you saying that to yourself, like, yo, you think our dad killed our mom? Do you think he beat up our mom the way he did these other women? Do you think he was doing all this extra shit, this freak off stuff with our mom? Especially when they're hearing the timeline of this shit. This shit just wasn't after Kim Porter All this shit was while Kim was still around. Cassie was while Kim was still around. That's the part that people forget. Cassie was around while Kim Porter was still around. I don't think the feds even put that. I think that's why I said, even if they get him or don't get him on the sex trafficking part, that little bit of that side right there is still open. Like, yo, we got him guilty of doing all of this other shit while Kim Porter was still around. Now we can actually take him back to court later to prove, yes, he had something to do with Kim Porter's murder. So Trees made it impossible for them to be normal. Yeah, that's the thing. They can't go anywhere without hearing this shit about their own dad. Yeah, there's a couple pictures of Cassie and Kim together with Diddy. That's what I'm saying. That's gonna make the twins wonder, like, wait a minute. It wasn't just Auntie Cassie? No. No.
A completed commercial sex act is not required. My understanding is these kinds of things came up today, debated by both the prosecution and the defense. And wasn't there something about that the way the prosecution has pled this case, that is what triggered the 15-year minimum that could be on the table for Sean Combs if he's convicted. What was the back and forth regarding sex trafficking and the language that the jury will hear on that?
Well, there was a lot of back and forth with the sex trafficking. Maybe not as much as the RICO, but definitely still there were moments, especially the defense, getting kind of animated while they were making their arguments. And by they, I mean Alexandra Shapiro. But as far as counts 2 and 4 goes, and that again pertaining to sex trafficking involving alleged victim 1, Cassie Ventura, and alleged victim 2, that being Jane. And so the government really was talking at first when it comes to this charge just about how physical restraint is not required. And it kind of falls under the same, I guess, guise as forced labor. And so the judge ended up agreeing about this because I think what a lot of people in their minds, when they think of sex trafficking, they may think of like physical restraint or that they were being held against their will, locked up in a basement or a warehouse, that type of thing. And so I think what the government is saying is that there needs to be an instruction that doesn't, or an instruction that includes that physical restraint is not a requirement to prove sex trafficking. Then the defense is saying that they were really kind of upset, I think, about the whole commercial sex acts kind of language that was used, because the defense argued that each of the 4 indictments, so that's the first indictment and the 3 superseding indictments that followed, according to the defense, they say that the victims engaged in commercial sex acts. And I mean, that was something that was laid out in the indictments. And so the defense argued that the government claimed, and there are multiple enterprise letters, that there were multiple dates and places of commercial sex acts, whereas the government says they aren't bound to their enterprise letter. And they argued that not every commercial sex act was completed, but some were. And they wanted that particular language to be added because they kind of point to the escorts being told to leave, something that Jane had testified to. There were also, they brought up the 2016 Intercontinental Hotel incident where Cassie, is seen on that surveillance video. According to her testimony, she was leaving a freak off. And so they kind of count that as this is not a completed sex act. And so the court said that they asked the court to give this instruction, whereas the defense kind of thought it was a little prejudicial. They say that the attempt is already captured here, and they say that the government shouldn't be allowed to argue it's not a harboring offense. The defense says, I'm concerned if the language is included that the victims engaged in sex trafficking if sex didn't occur. And so she's getting a little, she being Alexandra Shapiro was getting kind of animated here because she was saying that it's not fair that she thought initially the judge was saying that they made a late objection and that they got this objection in a little too late. And then Alexandra Shapiro was like, this isn't fair, we're making a late objection. The judge says, I didn't say it was a late objection. And then he ended up saying that he'll end up considering the issue. So the government said in their argument that they don't plan on making a lengthy harboring claim. So it seems like it's something that's definitely going to be talked about during closing arguments. And then as far as just the whole kind of exchange as far as initial consent and whether or not just because an alleged victim initially consented to doing the hotel nights or the freak-offs, that it doesn't mean that sex trafficking didn't occur. And so the government thought that this kind of language would be a little confusing to the jury. The defense says that there should be language about the defendant and his knowledge because the victims initially, the defense says that, these alleged victims, they initially agreed to be doing these hotel nights and these freak-offs. And so in terms of just Sean Combs' state of mind, he didn't know, especially towards the end, that this might have been non-consensual or that the victims didn't want to participate because of that initial consent. So a lot of the sex trafficking, kind of the same with the RICO, where it's just like about language, but I think it goes a little bit deeper, especially because of that gray area that these women were Sean Combs' former girlfriends. And so I think from the defense's point of view, they were really trying to argue just as to Sean Combs' state of mind, what he knew, what he didn't know, and they were initially, they were pretty much arguing that Sean Combs, because the alleged victims had consented at the beginning, doesn't mean that he was in the know that even towards the end of their respective relationships that they no longer wanted to participate in these hotel nights / freak-offs.
And then we go to counts 3 and 5. Transportation to engage in prostitution, which I have said before, feels like the most straightforward path for conviction of Sean Combs. You talk about the hotel records, the transport record, the travel records, the payments, the text messages, the voice notes from Sean Combs, that he played allegedly an integral part in transporting these individuals and these alleged victims for the purposes of sex work. Forget force, fraud, and coercion. That's not a part of it. It feels like a straightforward case. So I imagined when it came to the language there, the defense would try to put in anything that was beneficial to them, right? What was the back and forth regarding the language of transportation to engage in prostitution, which, by the way, nobody sneezes at that charge. It's a prostitution charge, but it carries up to 10 years in prison. So what was the back and forth on the language there?
Well, Jesse, the argument didn't last as long as maybe the other arguments go in terms of RICO and sex trafficking. And even Alexandra Shapiro said, okay, once we get to the Mann Act charges, we'll go a little bit faster here because by this time it's close to 7 p.m. They even turned the air off in the courthouse, so it was getting a little toasty.
The fuck they just turned the air off randomly for? You know what I'm thinking about too? I wonder if the jurors are allowed to look at shit like this with law and crime. Right? Like, even though they're in court and whatnot and they have to take oaths and shit like that, the way they can't, like, be on the side. They can't be on the side of things, right? Supposedly. But I wonder, like, we're in 2025, right? Do they just turn their phones off and YouTube off and just watch, like, Law and Order or something for the night and just go to sleep and wait the next day? Just, like, you know what I'm saying? Like, do they just purposely turn the TV off, in a sense? Just become completely oblivious to all this shit because they're not supposed to take sides and whatnot as jurors, right? I have to think about things like that. Like, are these people, like I said, oblivious completely to what is going on outside of the courtroom? The hearsays and the talks like that. Like, are they really, like, just ignoring all of it, or they have to, you know what I'm saying? Because they have to, like, not take sides and whatnot. Like, I remember that was a big thing. It was like, yo, what's in your bags and whatnot? And do you have any, like, Diddy memorabilia? Any no Diddy merchandise, anything like? They wanted to make sure, like, these people were just straightforward people. So it makes me, like I said, wonder, like, yo, are they able to watch a law and crime sidebar when they go in the house? Maybe. I wonder that. You know, that's the type of things I wonder right there in regards to him for sure.
In there, but once we finally got to counts 3 and 5, then we kind of were really getting to the beginning of the end of these arguments. But initially, the government had the first objection where they said the whole would engage in prostitution. They wanted that specific language to be changed to to an act of prostitution, because they say they didn't want to imply that the person who was transported, and in some instances across state lines, was a sex worker. And so I think that they were trying to say that these were acts of prostitution, not that these escorts or entertainers were actual prostitutes, that they were just doing acts of prostitution. Again, because when they had testified, that being Daniel Phillip and Sheree Hayes, something that the defense pointed out is that both of these men said that they weren't prostitutes. They say that what they were doing was paying or being paid for time. And
we were just being paid for our time. You know what I'm saying? We're not actual prostitutes. We're just cosplaying. We're just cosplaying. You know what I'm saying? We're not actual prostitutes. This is Halloween. What the fuck are y'all talking about?
Experience. They weren't being paid or didn't think that they were being paid for prostitution. And so the judge ended up kind of siding with siding with the government here. And so that specific language will be changed to acts of prostitution.
Yeah.
And so then the defense had some kind of issues a little bit with other lines that were included in this particular charge, but it seems like that was the biggest thing from both sides to really kind of hammer out here.
That's a problem for the defense, because that was one of their arguments. They even made it yesterday during their Rule 29 motion. Hey, these people weren't, prostitutes. He was paying them for their time and experience. Well, now it doesn't matter. If he transported them and in the end, right, there was a commercial sex act, there was an act of prostitution, that's a big win for the prosecution right there. Real quick, before we just wrap things up on some of these finer points, would you say generally your view was the language is more beneficial to the prosecution at the end of the day than it was for the defense?
Well, I mean, that's a really good question. I feel like it could go either way, because I'm just always thinking of it in layman's terms. These are lawyers, and very well-experienced lawyers at that, where they may say, okay, this language is very clear-cut. A jury will understand that. And jurors are very smart. That I will say that for sure. But in terms of just how this will all be read after hours and hours of closing arguments, I'm kind of wondering, okay, will this all click with the jury that this means this and this means that? But we'll have to wait and see what their reaction is once they ultimately sit down, get those closing arguments, and then get those instructions before they go into that room and deliberate.
And there was more parts that were debated between the attorneys and the judge. There was about language about what immunity is and what implicit bias is. There was also this thing about not having the G in government capitalized. The defense probably didn't want that. I don't know. Maybe it gives the government more authority. I don't know why they didn't really want that. That was interesting. But then right before they wrapped up court, there was this whole back and forth, right, between the prosecution and the defense about closing arguments. And when the defense's closing argument that's going to be delivered by Marc Agnifilio, when can he begin? What happened there?
Yeah, so it was kind of at that final moment. I think a lot of us were just antsy to get out of the courtroom. And then Alexandra Shapiro stands up. She's like, Your Honor, I have just one more thing. And so she actually asked the judge on behalf of Marc Agnifilio, who he wasn't present during this particular hearing. However, his client, Sean Combs, was. But he wasn't here at this hearing, mainly because he's preparing for closing arguments. Now, the ask was to move the defense's closings to Friday morning and begin on Friday. But what ended up happening is the government objected to this. They were like, I think this is just the defense kind of trying to play chess here, and that they were trying to get extra time to prepare for their closing arguments, and they don't want to waste the jury's time by only bringing them in for half a day. And so what they ended up doing is they're going to move closings just a little bit later tomorrow. I think they're going to start around maybe 10 o'clock-ish. They'll do 2 hours. We'll take a lunch break, and this will be the government first starting off. They'll do 2 hours of their summations. We'll have a lunch break. The government will finish their summations, and then likely the jury will be able to go home, hopefully early in the afternoon. Then the defense will come back on Friday, do their summations, and the government will have about an hour for rebuttal, then the jury instructions, and then possibly deliberations might still begin on Friday. It seems like from both sides, they didn't want to waste the jury's time, because especially with the 4th of July holiday coming up just next week, I think timing was really important to both sides. But it seems like, from my understanding of everything, that they are possibly prepared for deliberations to begin on Friday afternoon.
Yeah, look, the defense didn't want to begin their very important closing argument after lunch when the jury's tired, after they already heard the prosecution's closing. They want them fresh. They want them fresh. So I completely understand that. But at the end of the day, let's not forget, this is going to be, I imagine, a long deliberation process. But with the July 4th holiday, you also imagine the jurors want to get this done before that. But I don't know. Given the complexity of this case, don't be surprised if it extends past.
They closing this shit
July 4th
Monday, bro.
holiday. Elizabeth Milner, I know.
They closing this shit Monday, bro. Trust me when I tell you, this shit ain't going past Monday. 4th of July is Friday, bro. This shit is done. Monday, we are going to know if Diddy is going to jail or not, bro. This is over. So, Diddy trial day 34 recap. Defense tries to reframe alleged sex trafficking as one of the greatest modern love stories. This is literally what Agnifilio said on the damn thing, bro. Was that this is a modern love story. You want to talk about people rolling their eyes? Like when we was in BJ Investigates joint, shout out to BJ Investigates. Like it was a couple times that the prosecution laid some Don DeMarco's down. They put bars on. They put belt to ass. Like yeah, Diddy is he's good with his fists when it comes to his girlfriends. Like, and then Agnifilio tried to make it seem like the domestic violence was just okay. He was like, yeah, you know, the domestic violence thing, we own that. But the sex trafficking, we just didn't do that. Like, really, bro? I was like, yo, put the shovel down, Mark. Put the shovel down. I've never seen a lawyer bury their own client as much as he did. I've just never witnessed that the way I did. So it wasn't sex trafficking. It was one of the greatest modern love stories. Literally what this fucking fool was saying, yo. That's how lawyers from Sean Diddy Combs in their closing argument on Friday framed for the jury the world of alleged violence, drugs, and choreographed orgies at the heart of the federal case against one of the biggest superstars in the music world. After jurors heard weeks of testimony about Combs allegedly used drugs, violence, and threats to coerce women like his longtime girlfriend Cassie Ventura into sex with male escorts, defense attorney Marc Agnifilio argued that Combs and Ventura had a beautiful relationship. Beautiful until she got dragged up and down a hotel room that he owned. Hotel floor that he owned. That was tainted by jealousy and infidelity. Who was she jealous of? Let's break that part down, right? Who was Cassie jealous of? Kim? Cassie was jealous of Kim? It's like, you can say that, but then it's like, is Cassie still going to be jealous of somebody that passed away? That she knows who allegedly murdered her? You know, that type of thing. You will cry. You will read evidence with an exhibit sticker on it, and you will cry. Some of the most beautiful things ever said. Yo, this is why I said he was just burying his own client with the stupid shit that he was saying. Burying his own client. One of the most beautiful, you'll see some of the most beautiful things ever said. It's among these texts, right? These same texts where we saw freak-offs happening, where Cassie was in Daphne and certain people were like, yo, I don't even want to do that tonight. I want to be with just you, but I do not want to fuck somebody else right now because you're paying me. You know what I mean? Like, Daphne is still the biggest part of the sex trafficking part, where it's like, no, Daphne was literally paid $10,000 a month to fuck these dudes in front of you. Literally. Agnifilio said about the text messages between Combs and Ventura that were central pieces of evidence in the case. They are truly in love with each other, and that is what defines their relationship. No. And see, the more he would say shit like that, the more I got Joe Pesci from Goodfellas in my head. Remember Joe Pesci in Goodfellas? That's what Marc Agnifilio reminds me of. That's what he reminds me of. He reminds me of Joe Pesci in Goodfellas. And we all know what the fuck happened to Joe Pesci in Goodfellas, right? we all know what happened there, right? Anyway, that's who Marc Agnifilio reminds me of. Fucking little ass Joe Pesci that just beats on his wife, don't really care. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if he actually does or not. That's allegedly that he does, but He just gives off somebody that just don't give a fuck about women. I always figured when Kim died, Cassie said "uh-oh" and started making plans. I always thought that too. I have always said that to myself. I was like, yo, what if Cassie is really doing all this because she found out the truth about what really happened with Kim Porter? I think that's what really happened with this. Like, she just got tired of it, especially hearing and living through all the different shit that he was getting away with. Yeah, I think Cassie was the one that really got fed up when Kim Porter passed away, because she penned an incredible letter to her funeral. She penned an incredible letter at her funeral that, like I said, I think you're absolutely onto something there, Julia, that Cassie definitely started saying, you know what? It's time to get shit ready, because this could happen to me. If it happened to Kim Porter, of all people, it can happen to me. Combs' relationship with her and other women who testified under the Poseidon Jane are at the center of federal prosecutors' criminal case against Combs. They argue Combs love bombed the women, pressured them into participating in days-long sex parties called freak-offs or hotel nights, then used violence and threats to ensure they stayed quiet about Combs' voyeurism. After prosecutors presented a lengthy, nearly 5-hour closing statement on Thursday, Agnifilio responded with 4-hour summation, where he openly mocked the prosecution's case at various points and suggested Combs was unfairly targeted by law enforcement over his private sex life. He was targeted, again, that he was unfairly targeted by law enforcement, right? Over his quote unquote private sex life.
A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit? A bullshit?
Like I said, the amount of times people's eyes probably rolled while Agnifilio was talking is crazy. Thank goodness for the special response team. They found the baby oil. They found the Astroglide. Agnifilio said, referencing the hundreds of bottles of lubricant said to have been recovered from Combs' home, the only crime scene is your private sex life. Time out. Because this is where, like I said, I just started drawing the line with this nigga, right? With Marc Agnifilio. Because I'm like, yo, bro, do you even hear some of the shit that you're saying to people? Do you even hear what's possibly going on with this shit, right? I don't know why this is up here. So, real quick, right? I just want to look at, wait, what I got up here? Okay. Just making sure. Got pictures. Ooh, that. Hopefully nothing comes in that looks crazy. Oh, matter of fact, we just do this. Let me just do this. See if I can actually get it over here. Because they had pictures from the actual raid, right? Like, why you got all this, Diddy? Why you got all that? Why do you have all this, bro? Can I get back to what I was at? No, I don't want to create an account. I want to do what I just did. Damn it. I don't want to do that. Get out of here. Thank you. Like, you don't need this. with the Dr. Plague mask up there. You don't need that. You don't need none of this stuff, man. All these guns and whatnot, and like I said, the Astroglide in the baby oil. Like, you don't need that much, man. This one's diabolical. Like, it was just certain shit that you're saying to yourself, like, yo, why do you have this, bro? Like, why do you have some of this stuff, bro? But you have boxes of Astroglide, bro. Then these torture rooms. When I saw shit like that, it made me think of when Mano was talking about the mansion parties that he would see where people was getting, where dudes and whatnot were getting fucked in their careers were pretty much being made right in front of them, to where the blackballing was happening. No drugs in the baby oil, just the love for baby oil. You think Diddy would have made his own baby oil brand? He's like an expert. Yo, every time I see baby oil now, I get sick to my stomach. Every time I see baby oil now, I just literally get sick to my stomach because I have the visual of him drinking the baby oil. That shit just makes me sick to my stomach. It literally fucking sickens me when I see baby oil now. Like, I literally just get nauseous when I look at it. While Agnifilio acknowledged that Combs might have engaged in domestic violence, right? Or threatened to release sex tapes of his romantic partners, Agnifilio argued Combs is not guilty of the charges he faces, including the allegation he used his business empire to run a criminal organization devoted to fulfilling his sexual appetites. That's the part you not getting, Mark. It's because his lifestyle, because he was quote unquote a CEO of Bad Boy with not a single fucking artist on the label doing anything, and paying for these freak offs and paying for these women to have sex with other people with company money. Why are you not seeing that there's a charge of sex trafficking that even you are explaining to the people? Combs is charged with racketeering, conspiracy, sex trafficking, and transportation to engage in prostitution. He has pleaded not guilty, and his attorneys have insisted that domestic violence and drug use are not the issues in the criminal case that has occupied the tabloids and headlines for weeks. His defense lawyers maintain that all sexual encounters were consensual. Combs faces the possibility of a life sentence if convicted on all of the counts. It's not all of the counts, of course, right? So if he gets knocked off on one, but then he gets some, he still could be in there for about 20, 30 years minimum. The jury of 8 men and 4 women are set to begin deliberating Combs' fate Monday morning after the judge overseeing the case instructs them on the charges and how to apply the law to the testimony they've heard since May. So, what does it say? Defense tries to discredit testimony from alleged victims. So, jurors had 13 days of testimony from 3 alleged victims who took the stand to help prosecutors build their case against Combs. Ventura, a singer herself and longtime girlfriend of Combs, Jane testified Combs pressured them to participate in the sex parties. Fearing violence or reputational harm if they refuse. A former assistant who testified under the name Mia said that the rap mogul sexually assaulted and raped her heart. During this simulation, Agnifilio tried to keep a wave net of credibility of which away at the credibility, tried to chip away at the credibility of each of the women, arguing they were motivated by money and that the prosecutors exaggerated their claims against Combs. No, they didn't. They didn't exaggerate anything. They didn't exaggerate anything at all. The defense cast Ventura as a beautiful woman who loved sex and seeking to undermine the government's portrayal of her as an actual victim of sex trafficking. When she wasn't with Sean Combs, she was with Michael B. Jordan. Agnifilio said of the movie star, he's the most handsome man in the world. She's not messing around. She's at a high level. She has sexual confidence. Good for her. She's not clutching her pearls. See, this is where, like I said, he started to really bury her, because now you're trying to play off the fact that Cassie was a victim, and you made yourself look the worst way in history as far as it goes. You made yourself look the worst way possible when you said that, especially with Cassie getting pissed off. She just got $30 million. The lawsuit claiming this nigga was a sodomizer and manipulator, could have coerced people all the time. Yeah, I want that lawsuit. You should not be saying that, Agnifilio. Like, yeah, she was with another dude. You know, when she wasn't with Diddy, she was with someone else. She was with someone else because she was trying to get out from under him. Just trying to get out from under him. Like Ventura, Jane was no trafficking victim. The defense lawyer asserted, saying she's agreeing to the kind of sexual activity with male prostitutes that Combs desired. What is she agreeing to? I doubt she's agreeing that. She regrets it. She resents him for it. That came later. Agnifilio said she agreed to it. That's all you need to know, and we can be done with it. As you see in this illustration right here, poor Cassie being drugged up the floor by Diddy. Agnifilio disputed federal prosecutors' contention that Combs used paying Jane's $10,000 monthly rent as leverage to coerce her to participate. The house is a gesture of kindness, of decency and niceness. Agnifilio said, I hope she's having a nice day. I don't know what she's doing, but I know she's doing it in a house he paid for. Addressing the allegations of sexual assault or rape made by Mia, Combs' attorney argued the sexual encounters were voluntarily. He highlighted the what does it say? He highlighted the effusive birthday message she sent Combs 1 year to suggest their relationship had crossed from the professional into the romantic. Defense tries to dismantle racketeering predicates in the response to prosecutors' allegation that Combs used security guards, staff, in instance to commit crimes. Agnifilio mocked prosecutors for suggesting that Combs' actions were part of a border control criminalization, which you can make the same RICO with him. Agnifilio tried to distance Combs from some of the underlying crimes that prosecutors say Combs agreed to commit with other members of the alleged enterprise, including arson, kidnapping, and bribery. Prosecutors alleged Combs orchestrated the firebombing of the luxury sports car of the rapper Kid Cudi after learning the fellow musician was seeing Ventura in 2011. Agnifilio called the claim nonsense and argued no evidence directly linked Combs to the crime. There is no evidence. No evidence that he had anything to do with the Porsche. Agnifilio said federal prosecutors argue Combs and his associates were worried about being arrested after the attack on Ventura Court on 2016 hotel surveillance cameras and sought to bribe a security guard in return for the footage. Agnifilio said Combs had a different motive: distrust or hotel staff. Money is involved. Money is involved. People want a payday. Agnifilio said, telling the jury, hold staff may have been willing to sell video of someone as famous as Combs. They're not worried about the police. Yeah, I bet he wasn't worried about the police. Like I said, you just couldn't put the shovel down, Mark. you couldn't put this shovel down. In staccato remarks, Agnifilio questioned the allegations of Combs' one-time personal assistant, Capricorn Clark, who testified she was forced to submit to a 5-day lie detector test after Combs' jewelry went missing. Prosecutors said that that amounted to kidnapping. She went home every day, so what is the government alleging? Agnifilio half shouted, I have no doubt that she was unsettled. She was not kidnapped. Prosecutor says Combs trapped his victims. After hours of defense closing arguments, prosecutor Maureen Comey addressed the jury. She denounced the defense summation. I think it's dissemination for insulting the women. Wanted it, telling jurors it defied local logic not to think Ventura, you wanted me to escort. Telling jurors it defied logic to think Ventura wanted to escort, to urinate on her, or go through other elements of sex sessions. So whatever I do say goes, pretty much. What we're talking about is being in a dark hotel, say mention the Red Room, awake for days, covered in oil, often with a urinary tract infection and heels, with your pelvic area sore. Having sex for hours, including with strangers, Comey said, the defense wanted you to believe Cassie and Jane wanted that. That's ridiculous on its face. Don DeMarco, like she just had bars for them. The prosecutor had bars, okay? Comey told jurors they must find one freak off when Combs knew he was using force, fraud or coercion to gain Ventura or Jane's compliance in order to convict Combs of sex trafficking. The defendant never thought the women he abused would have the courage to speak out loud about what he had done with him. Comey said, for 20 hours, the defendant got away with his crimes. That ends in this courtroom. The prosecutors were not playing with him. They were just not playing with him whatsoever. They were making sure that he had no type of rebuttal with this shit. That's what I was saying here. They were just making sure he had zero rebuttal to it. Let me see here. New Eyes, what's going on? Glad you can make it. What's going on with your New Eyes? What's going on with you? Okay, let me see. I thought I had something in here for Christian by himself, but I do not. I should say Justin. Yeah, let's get into the Justin Combs situation. Where is it? Trying to see if I had the video still, but I do not. Okay. So I thought I had a damn video in here. Oh, shoot. It is here. Okay, I'm like, where is my thing for Justin? Oh, let me just hit this button here too. Just so it's easier to see.
A bombshell new lawsuit that involves Sean Diddy Combs, but isn't against the disgraced music mogul, as Diddy is listening to closing arguments in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial in federal court in New York. His son, Justin has been hit with a lawsuit by a woman who claims that he lured her to Los Angeles to be raped by multiple men, including his dad, Sean Diddy Combs. Now, this isn't the first time that Justin has been named in a lawsuit with his famous father. We're on the case presented by Law and Crime. I'm Chris Stewart. How about the timing of this new lawsuit involving the son of Sean Diddy Combs? It was just in the hours after the government on Thursday finished their closing arguments in the case against the disgraced music mogul that we learned about this new lawsuit against Sean Combs' son, Justin. Justin is one of Diddy's 7 kids. Here he is with his dad's arm around his shoulder. Justin has been in court supporting his dad just as his siblings have been over the past 7 weeks of testimony. Now, listen, whatever your feelings are on Sean Combs and whether you think he's guilty of the charges that could put him in federal prison for the rest of his life, you just have to think how difficult it must be to hear about all the sexual exploits of their father. But if you believe the allegations I'm about to tell you in this new lawsuit brought against Justin Combs, Justin apparently was very aware of his dad's lifestyle. The new lawsuit that just dropped was filed by a woman from Louisiana who says in 2017, Justin Combs coaxed her to come to LA because she says that Diddy's son promised her a job in the entertainment industry. She claims the two had met on Snapchat, and Justin allegedly asked for explicit pictures, and she sent them. The woman, who's not named in this suit, says when she got to LA, she was raped by several men, including a certain music mogul now at the center of this high-profile...
Yes, the long-faced one is Christian.
...historic trial in federal court in Lower Manhattan. Yes, Sean Diddy Combs. The alleged victim claims that Justin invited her out west for a weekend to talk about her career. But when she got there, she says she was kept in a house in Beverly Hills. And according to the lawsuit, things seemed fine at first, but when she allegedly asked Justin Combs if they were going to leave the house, he said no. She claims that Justin Combs offered her alcohol, pills, and weed, and she thinks that the weed was laced. Now, you can see in those allegations some of the comparisons in this lawsuit to the so-called freak-offs that we have been hearing about for weeks at the center of the Sean Diddy Combs sex trafficking and racketeering trial. The woman says after she took the drugs, 3 men entered the house and all of them were wearing masks. Now, it's unclear what kind of masks the men were wearing, but when I read that part, I thought about the testimony of Sheree Hayes in the Sean Diddy Combs trial, the escort known as the Punisher. He testified that during a freak-off, Sean Combs allegedly wore a face covering that he likened to a Muslim hijab. In the lawsuit against Justin Combs, the alleged victim says that she knew that one of the men was Diddy just because of his mannerisms, but how about this? She also knew it was Diddy because she says that Justin, as his dad entered the home to allegedly rape a woman that he brought to LA, called Diddy, quote, Pops. Now, we see on Justin's social media that Pops is the phrase that he often uses for his dad. In this lawsuit, the alleged victim claims that she was led to a bedroom where she was allegedly told, quote, you better let this happen or else. Then she says that each man took a turn raping her, calling it a, quote, brutal gang rape. After that, she was taken to an airport on Monday and flown home. Not only is Diddy facing the possibility of spending the rest of his life in prison if convicted of all the charges in his sex trafficking and racketeering trial, there have been nearly 80 lawsuits filed against him in civil court. Many are still active. Several of the lawsuits accuse Diddy of sexual abuse and are filed by people who are not giving their names, just like in this lawsuit that we're talking about. This also isn't the first lawsuit that Justin Combs has recently faced. Justin was named in a suit brought by music producer Rodney Jones, who goes by Little Rod. Rod claims that Diddy coerced him into sexual acts, and you can see the suit also names Justin Combs and accused Justin of covering up a shooting in 2022 at Little Rod's studio in LA with his dad. In May, a judge did dismiss Justin from Little Rod's lawsuit, so he is no longer facing those allegations.
So this is separate. This is a whole separate new thing. This is what I'm talking about, y'all. This is the shit that I'm talking about. Like, you have both of your boys are now criminals because of your bullshit. You have Justin in not one, not two, but 3, damn near 4 different fucking lawsuits, including you, Diddy. Including you. How dumb can you be to yell out pops in the middle of the gang raping? Now, see, this is where some things could be said far-fetched. Some things can sound far-fetched. But some things are not. Because, as he just said, Little Rod said that, he witnessed a gentleman by the name of G shot in the studio. Blood everywhere. We even saw the news report of how one thing was said over another, on how the gentleman G was shot at a completely different location, and that he pretty much, was like, oh no, they didn't have nothing to do with it type shit. The police just threw it up under the rug. Fahim Muhammad was there, and this shit just got wiped up under the rug. That is the type of shit that they're in. And also call one of them King Combs, so I get confused. Christian is King Combs. So the dark-skinned, slim kid is Christian Combs, a.k.a. King Combs. The reason why he's called King Combs is because he looks identical to Diddy, pretty much. Versus Justin, who looks identical more to his father and Misa. Like I said, Justin is not his actual biological kid. That's Misa and Anthony Wolf's son. Gene Deal has confirmed that now. He's finally come out clean and confirmed that. King Combs, like I said, is the dark-skinned one. And we're going to get into his music, unfortunately, in a second.
As for the lawsuit filed in the hours before his dad's attorneys were to make closing arguments, E! News reports that Diddy's attorneys have denied the allegations, but it's unclear what Justin's response is at the time of this recording. Joining us now is criminal defense attorney Will Corman. Always great to have you on Law and Crime. Thanks for being with us. What stands out to you in this lawsuit that Sean Combs is named, but also his son Justin?
Well, it's interesting. I think the connection to Sean Combs is pretty tenuous. We've gone through this all. It almost seems the one connection to Sean Combs that they actually put on him is the allegation that Justin called one of the masked men pops during the course of the assault or just before the assault. That's it. The other connection, obviously, is that Sean Combs is Justin Combs' dad. So I think it's a bit of a stretch. Again, we're just receiving these documents now, and we're just going through this lawsuit now. Perhaps there's more out there, but it really doesn't seem that way.
And of course, people who are victims of sexual violence, you want them to get their justice. We have seen dozens of lawsuits filed against Justin's dad in the wake of when he was indicted for the trial that he's on right now. How do you go through these lawsuits and understand who's telling the truth and who actually has a case that could be heard in court? Someone like Cassie Ventura, when you see that video from 2016, or you do look at some of these Jane Doe lawsuits and you wonder how many of them are true.
Look, as a criminal defense attorney, it's my job to be cynical, and it's my job to, review everything with a pretty jaundiced eye. So the question really becomes are there corroborating facts and circumstances from Jump Street that make sense? So, for example, if this lawsuit is alleging that something happened in LA during a specific period of...
Yes, that's very true. I did I don't know who For No Fame is, but I did a video on it when I did I want to say about a year and a half ago, before all this, the case and everything. So I did a video on it when I did The Ghost of Bad Boys Mace, right? You guys can look at that on patreon.com. I think I have bits and pieces of it on the channel here, but I do have an actual video breaking down not only Janice Combs, but also Justin Combs publishing. I have an actual video breaking down all the publishing that Justin Combs owned, that he Justin has never stepped foot in the fucking studio. I've always said that. Justin has never stepped foot in the studio. For him to have musical credits on Beyonce albums and R. Kelly albums is what baffled me. I was like, how? How? Just how? 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 So I was like, okay. He definitely has his son involved in things that, he just shouldn't be in whatsoever. And that was why I put the picture of the kids all together, because I'm like, at one point, all of them were innocent. At one point in life, before Diddy's corruption, all those kids were innocent. Every last one. The twins are the last of the Mohicans. Because right now, I can only imagine what going through Quincy's mind also. How Quincy has been extremely quiet the past couple of weeks. He's probably been the least vocal since all of this has happened. Or the least seen since all this has happened.
The time, do we know that Sean Combs was there? Do we actually know that he was present in LA? These things aren't difficult to find out, but it's those baby steps to trying to build the foundation of a lawsuit to see what's realistic that really matter in a case like this. And as you so correctly said, we want victims of domestic violence, of sexual violence, and so on and so forth to actually be compensated accordingly. Unfortunately, when we have circumstances where we have somebody famous who's been charged with crimes, we have somebody famous who's been sued, there can be instances where other folks jump on the bandwagon. And I'm not suggesting that's what's happening here, but it is something that everyone needs to look at skeptically.
Right, absolutely. If you were to bring a lawsuit against someone like Justin Combs, or any of these, and even the cases involving his dad, and you're bringing a civil suit, what facts do you need to have? I mean, certainly if you have a victim who says that this happened and they're ready to, they're able to provide some corroborating evidence that something happened, what do you actually need to be able to go to the courthouse and say, I'm filing a lawsuit against this person?
I think that you need to have somebody who's willing to state under oath that this is what happened to me, that this is what I'm alleging, these are my damages, this is how it's impacted me. And as an attorney, again, I would want to make sure, especially in a lawsuit like this where it involves a high-profile person, but quite frankly, in any lawsuit, that there is some corroborating information out there so that my lawsuit isn't tossed out of court pretty quickly.
And reading through this complaint, it mentions several other lawsuits. You have the lawsuit from Rodney Jones, who's known as Little Rod, and Sean Combs is facing that lawsuit, and his son was named in it, but has since been dropped. What do you make about it having all these other different cases and elements brought in? What is the attorney here trying to prove?
Well, it almost appears as if the attorney is saying, where there's smoke, there's fire. So here are all these other lawsuits, and I've reviewed the complaint, and they talk about them in some detail. They don't just list them. They say, this happened on this date, and this person sued Sean Combs here, and this person sued Sean Combs here for this set of facts and circumstances. And they're essentially trying to say, because there's all these other lawsuits, you should give this one a stamp of approval, because again, where there's smoke, there's fire.
Tony Busby, his law firm is bringing this. He has been in the civil world a very, very prominent name. For those who don't know him, and you work in criminal defense, what do you know about Tony Busby? Knowing that it's his law firm bringing this, what does that tell you?
I don't think that the Busby law firm is taking these allegations lightly. I believe they have the resources to do their own investigations prior to actually filing these suits. So this isn't some, sole practitioner who's trying to jump on the cottage industry that's been created around suing Sean Combs. I think that they have the ability to investigate this. They have the ability to decide whether or not they want to take on these cases. And I think that does lend some credibility, albeit, not a ton, but I think it does lend some credibility to the facts and circumstances surrounding it. In other words, this alleged victim didn't just walk in off the street to some random law firm who then is saying, oh, we now have the ability to sue Sean Combs. This is someone who's been down this well-trod path before and probably knows exactly what the pitfalls are in suing somebody as prominent as Sean Combs.
This lawsuit came down at the time we're recording this, came down last night. So that was a couple hours after the government finished their closing arguments against Sean Combs. And as we're recording this right now, Sean Combs, his defense team is giving his closing argument. What do you make about the timing of this? It's against Justin Combs and Sean Combs' name, but it's happening right in the middle of maybe the most pivotal part of this entire trial.
I don't exactly know what to make of the timing of it. I think it's interesting. I think that I'm a little surprised that it's come out so late, but sometimes, we don't know what led the alleged victim in this lawsuit to break their silence and to file this lawsuit. Perhaps they were watching the testimony or reviewing the testimony in the criminal case and said...
Tell you exactly what it was. Timing. And in regard to that timing, it's the fact that you already have Diddy in jail, but you have Justin pretty much by the balls because he still is recovering from having to pay off that car note that he can't pay off at all. Where, of course, Uncle Ye probably comes in and jumps in and helps, right? Even still, the fact that Justin can barely afford to pay any of his bills right now because his daddy's in jail. It's the perfect time to sue Justin. It's the absolute perfect time to see him. Absolute perfect time to get him where it hurts right now because he can't defend himself literally. He can't hire a high-priced lawyer and get this swept under the rug. He can't hire someone. It's just like he can't even get a script for this type of shit. As well as it's hard. It's very hard to do all this without the person that they are mainly trying to accuse, which is unfortunately your dad. That's the hardest part of this for them, especially for Justin. It's like he can't do anything. Literally, he can't hire a lawyer. He's literally by himself right now. So yeah, that's a perfect time for this person to actually file a lawsuit because Justin can't defend himself as good as he would have been able to with his dad still around.
And oh my gosh, that's exactly what happened to me. Perhaps they said, they listened to the testimony and they said, there are so many victims here. I believe that I am one too. We don't know what prompted it. I think the timing is interesting, but I don't know that I can make anything of it as we sit here right now.
I think of recently you had Tyler Perry, prominent name in Hollywood, very different case, but accused of sexual violence and sexual harassment, workplace harassment with an actor who had worked on one of his shows, and the actor provided text messages in the complaint. This doesn't have that. Very different case. But does the fact that there's not that visual evidence that we can look at, and I don't know what type of visual evidence would exist in a case like this, but the fact that we don't particularly have those, does that take away from the weight of what this lawsuit may actually be in the end when it comes to the truth?
Well, I think we're getting ahead of ourselves a little bit here because
Sure.
The filing of a complaint is just simply the first step, and all the complaint needs to do on paper anyway is set forth the factual allegations that are enough to sort of not get the case thrown out at the first few stages, and that bar is pretty low. So there may be tons of evidence surrounding these allegations that aren't in the lawsuit. They don't need to be in the lawsuit. Again, there needs to be just enough to get us through those first few steps.
Wow. So you're getting the confirmation that like, nah, we can get Justin by himself if we need to, even if daddy's incarcerated. Yo, he can bring his ass out in the orange jumpsuit if need be and sit down here without an oath at all. And you, Justin, your lawyers that you have left are literally the only response. With your lawyers only had to do one thing, right? That was answer to your daddy.
As Sean Combs, we're awaiting, once the jury gets the case next week, and then we'll see what the verdict is. But guilty or not guilty, he's going to be dealing with a lot of civil cases that are still pending. What does the timeline look like for Sean Combs? Let's just say he's found not guilty of everything. What does the legal timeline look for him? How long could he be dealing with the issues related to all these civil suits?
That's a great question. First of all, I don't think he's going to be found not guilty of everything. So that's a separate issue entirely. Yeah. Having said that, again, different jurisdictions have different statutes of limitations for sex assault victims to bring lawsuits within which, or timelines within which they can bring the lawsuits. And so again, depending on where allegations come from, those statutes of limitations can be very long. It also matters on how old the alleged victim was at the time that the incident took place. For example, there have been a number of states which have extended statutes of limitations for minors who were sexually assaulted. Those statutes of limitations are much longer than for adults who've been sexually assaulted. So it really does depend. And I know that's not quite answering the question, but I suppose the easiest answer is it could go on for quite some time.
And you look at this complaint, the complaint is for sexual assault and battery, gender violence, negligent supervision. I think a lot of people would look at this and they'd certainly, if all of this is true, what a horrific experience that this victim went through. Why is this not a criminal case?
That's a great question. And I suppose that this victim could have brought this to the county attorney's office or whatever local prosecutorial body there are. We don't know the answer to that. Perhaps quite frankly, we simply don't know the answer to that. But it's also important to remember this, that Sean Combs is named in this lawsuit. I have reviewed this lawsuit. The connection to Sean Combs is pretty thin from a legal standpoint. It just is. So
it's this thing. I really doubt that he would yell at your pops, while he's in the middle of gang raping somebody. Like, he's not 2 years old or something like that. Like, I'm pretty sure he would know that part. And then, yeah, I don't necessarily see where they charge necessarily Diddy with this one, because it sounds like it's more so Justin than anything. That's another thing. This one sounds more Justin than anything, but of course you always have to keep that point in your back of your mind. Would Justin even be doing any of this stuff if it wasn't for Diddy and him teaching him this stuff?
We don't know why this wasn't brought forth criminally. Perhaps the person decided they would rather seek their own form of justice from a civil standpoint. Sean Combs has a lot going on criminally right now, and perhaps it wouldn't even be prosecuted. Again, if he's found guilty of all these offenses in federal court in New York, Sean Combs is going to prison for decades. He's 55 years old, not that old, but he's still going to prison for a very long time. So I don't know that the LA District Attorney's Office or whatever prosecutorial body is out there would bother pursuing criminal charges if Sean Combs at age 55 just gets a 30-year sentence federal.
And for Justin Combs, and I assume he'll have, I don't know if he has a trust or an inheritance or how he financially makes a living. Certainly it's part of being in the circle of Sean Combs. How does he pay for an attorney? Is that have to come from it? Because I think if Sean Combs is found guilty and all this money, and he's got a lot, but maybe we don't know how much money Sean Combs has, frankly, but we know that it's going to a lot of these cases. How does Justin Combs defend himself? Does this get wrapped into, if his dad's going to have to defend against this, is it a 2-for-1 when it comes from the defense side?
It could be. We certainly don't know what the corporate structure is of Bad Boy Records and all the other entities that are named as defendants in this lawsuit. I have a feeling that Justin Combs will get counsel. I have a feeling that Justin Combs will get excellent counsel. How it gets paid for is probably something we'll never know, but it's not as if he's going to be flipping through Google looking for a lawyer to represent him on this.
And even if a lawsuit has no merit to it whatsoever, and this is more just a hypothetical question, because I think some people do look at some of the Tony Busby lawsuits, and there's an idea of like all of these are just a money grab. And we'll see, to your point, a very prominent name who is representing alleged victims to Sean Combs. But if someone were to file a lawsuit that's fruitless, you still, as the person who is being accused in that lawsuit, would have to pay for an attorney, have to show up in court and kind of play along. Is that like you have to play along with the lawsuit until it's dismissed?
Sure. You can't read a lawsuit and say, this is garbage, crumple it up and throw it away and then ignore it. It doesn't work like that. You would have to get a lawyer who is able to get in front of a judge and explain to the court why this lawsuit is frivolous and should get cut off at the soonest possible opportunity. And as I said, there's now a whole cottage industry surrounding these Sean Combs lawsuits. There just is. So no one can afford to simply ignore this lawsuit and pretend it didn't happen. It needs to be addressed, frivolous or not. Again, I certainly don't know if it is frivolous, but regardless, everybody who's named as the defendant here does need to take it seriously.
For this plaintiff, beyond assuming, Diddy's defense has said that there's no merit to this story. We haven't heard at the time of this recording from what Justin Combs, his representatives are saying. Right now he's sitting in court listening to the closing argument. that his father's defense team is making. But beyond a witness's account, and she says she was there and this happened and it was horrible. And if there's no other evidence and it's a complete he said, she said, how does that play out in civil court?
So again, it's enough. I mean, a victim getting up on the witness stand and saying, this is what happened to me, that's evidence. Now, a jury may want corroboration, but there's no requirement that there be any. And that's the job of opposing counsel, right? To say, well, how come there's no DNA? How come there's no text messages? Where's all the proof other than the victim's testimony that this happened? And that's what they would argue. But the fact of the matter is it is enough. There's no requirement that there be something else out there, some smoking gun, literal or figurative, to show that this actually happened. If this witness is able to get up on the witness stand, go through direct examination, go through cross-examination, if the jury finds that that person is credible, that's enough.
And lastly for you, kind of an on-the-spot question. If you had to guess how much Sean Combs' legal fees are for fighting back on these civil cases, I mean, ballpark, what would you think?
Are we talking about just the civil cases? Or are we going to,
Well, let's start with civil first, because then he has, the starting, like the all-star team of lawyers on his criminal side as well. And I'm sure that's not cheap.
The 2025 dream team, as it were.
Right.
I can't even begin to imagine what this looks like. I just can't. I mean, we're talking about tens of millions of dollars at a base level. $100 million if we're throwing in the criminal cases. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot.
Yeah, it is. Because I think too, like even if you were to, not be able to afford a top flight lawyer for even one of these cases, and that lawyer,
Okay, this is pretty open and closed shut. Justin is done. Justin is done just like his dad. Okay, Justin is done just like his dad. And like I said, if it wasn't for Agnifilio cooking him a new one the way he did today, we could be saying Diddy might get free tomorrow, y'all. But after today's closing arguments, last 2 days, I should say, it's clear. It's clear he's not coming home. He's not coming home. And if anything, we'll see the next time we see jury after this will be in an orange jumpsuit defending his son. And who knows, maybe Diddy will take the time for his son. Or should I say, try to take the time for his son, but that ain't how this works. That ain't how this works. We're the first father and son duo in jail for music. I'll tell you that much. That's some bullshit for you. Okay. I was going to play Scott Storch's Diddy story, but it sounds so damn crazy that I didn't even want to, It's like everybody got a Diddy story now all of a sudden, right? Let me see. Oh, okay. Yeah, let's do that. So apparently Scott Storch had a story about Diddy, saying that, he came on to him and tried to flirt with him and all that. He tried to love bomb him.
Diddy parties, all the stuff that Diddy's going through. Did you have a close relationship? You were in the Palm, so you're in Miami. He's down here. What was your relationship with Diddy?
He was on Star, I was on Palm, and we were cool. Like, we were like comrades, so to speak. Like, real, cool. I was invited to all the parties and this and that, but I wasn't staying late at those parties because I would leave for my parties, which were, potent as well. But I wasn't like, there was no like swinger shit or fucking.
You didn't have swinger stuff.
No, I don't. I'm the only dick in the room. I don't like. I'm not into that weird shit. Like, I don't want to like have no part of that. But there was some bad bitches in my house, and excessive everything, and I remember like. My house was more like the Wolf of Wall Street type vibes. It wasn't like, I don't know. There was no weird shit going on, but I didn't really see any weird shit at Diddy's because it was just, to me, it seemed like everybody was having a great time and he was the provider of an amazing event that everybody wanted to get into, and like all the time, and spared no expense with fireworks and all kinds of shit, and all the A-list people. I was one of the few people who was allowed to go in the house, and during one of these parties, most people are just like left outside. Huge people.
Whose house is that, Rob?
That was mine.
Oh, that's your house.
Yeah.
It's nice.
Yeah, I was the first buyer of that. It's called the Villa Ferrari. A bunch of builders like got into a fight, and like there was like I had to finish the house. At any rate, oh yeah.
So at these Diddy parties, you get invited into the house. Not many people get into the house.
Yeah, but again, I was
saying you didn't
there
see
at
anything.
a time when there was nothing even remotely.
So when you hear these stories,
Like I was
you're
the
like,
weirdest
what?
guy in the party. I felt like I was the biggest fucking like piece of shit in the party because I was in the fucking hiding in the media room doing like coke and stuff. You know what I mean? And I remember Diddy looking at me and he's like, "What does that stuff make you feel like?" And it was me and another famous producer in there, and we were like trying to explain it to him. But I guess over time, like he was probably introduced. I don't know for sure, but I mean, or kept things around for people that wanted it.
But at this time, you're saying that Diddy didn't even know what coke was. Like he wasn't doing any
He
drugs.
was joking around with us, but like he was like kind of looking at us like, "What does that shit make y'all feel like?" And this and that. Like it was just like he was like as innocent type vibe, but like
Meaning he didn't do drugs.
I think he was doing like probably ecstasy and Molly. That was more socially acceptable at that time.
Yeah.
Even though later we learned that leaves like holes in your brain and like robs you of your serotonin and shit like that. But look, here's my take on the Diddy thing. Forget about the parties. Who Diddy is, who they're trying to make him out to be. I said this just recently. I'll say it again. There's no excuse to hit a woman. I've never put my hands on a woman my whole life unless I was smacking her on the ass while I'm fucking her. All right? I've never gotten to that stage where I'll just walk away. Like, I'm not going to get into a fight with you. Like, you're not going to, like, I've had girls that got violent with me. Like, I'm like, no, goodbye. See ya. I'm not part of that. So who knows what the hell was going on during that? So there's no excuse for that. To me, it looks like motherfuckers were up for like 3 days doing some fucked up drug, and it was like not who he is now this like drugged up dopamine version of what Diddy is, and like that shit somehow happened. I don't think he's somebody who just beats women up. He's not like Jake LaMotta or some shit like whatever the case is. That was that. As far as them saying to like that he's a sex trafficker. To me, sex trafficking is selling pussy, right? I think if anything, he was like buying it and like just having girls on deck and putting them on a fucking Gulfstream and going over state lines. That's not cool. Like just call somebody like a sex trafficker, like whatever the fuck. Nobody was having a problem with eating caviar with him and taking his money. Like, so I don't think that's fair. I think that RICO, you gotta have more than one name there. I just think that if you try and go up against liquor, oil, like all the, firearms, tobacco, all these things, like you're gonna have some fucking problems. That's the real fucking Illuminati. And he went up against Diageo and said, I could do my own Ciroc. And like, they were like, oh yeah? They dropped a bomb on his ass. The crime doesn't fit the punishment with him. I still have my pictures up of Diddy on my Instagram. Now, disappointed, yeah, that he put his hands on a woman. I'll forgive. If I find out that he did something to a little kid or did some like pedophile shit, which I don't think they're gonna find because I don't think that's who he is. I don't get that from him. Whatever picture they're trying to paint from him is this devious guy. I mean, whatever. Like, he's gangsta for sure. Like, he's definitely like, he's from New York. Like, he's not a pussy. Is he a homosexual? Bisexual? Everybody's trying to push that. Is he a cuck? Which is like watching other. I wasn't in the room. I do know I felt like at one point he tried to flirt with me and shit, and I was just like, I'm good on that type of shit. But,
Oh, really?
yeah. Oh, yeah. Like, But
Like, what do you mean he tried to flirt with it?
I'm just gonna leave it simple like that. You know, that's it.
Well, I mean, that's a pretty bold statement, Scott.
Bro, it's just I'm gonna say it like it fucking, you know, it is what it is. He's my homie, man. Like,
Gotcha.
But like I just felt.
But there
like
was
that
never any
energy-
bad beef. There was any.
Nah,
you never
man,
saw anything.
nah.
See, that's the thing, right? You done took the cat out the bag. Now you trying to put the cat back in the bag and shit. The cat scratching around and shit like, motherfucker, you done already took me out the bag. Why are you trying to put me back in it? Cat's a Capricorn, but he doesn't just beat women. No, definitely doesn't just beat women. He definitely has an anger problem with all. I mean, all. He definitely has an anger problem with all. But yeah, that was Scott Stewart's little story or whatever.